Hey everybody, and welcome back to Simple Rick's Tutorials. I've been off for a long while, and I've been experimenting with some really cool stuff that I'm going to be making videos about soon. A lot to do with AI and building agents, AI agents with AI. So look for new videos coming soon, and I'll be making some better quality tutorials with a slightly different format. So yeah, keep your eyes open. Today what we're going to do is look at how we can make some bugs in Noodle and how we can debug the bugs, because I had a question in the Discord about using the console log, so I want to show console logging and also some stuff about the network panel in the browser debug console. So let's just jump in and have a look at what we're talking about. We're talking about when things start going wrong in Noodle. So I've got a whole bunch of stuff that's gone wrong here. I'll give you one example. Is showing a pop-up. So here I've got a show pop-up node that is targeting the wrong target. So there is no component called wrong target, but I've typed it in manually just to force it to bug out. So what happens when we click the button? When we click the button, nothing happens because there is no target, but maybe we would be left wondering, why is my pop-up not showing up? That's weird. There is of course the error logging at the top. But this error logging, for example, here, it's only telling us something about the function that's bugging out here. It's not telling us about why the pop-up isn't showing up. So I don't really use this that much. I much more use the debugging console, which is here. So this is just a straight dev tools from Chromium browser type thing. It opens up this. You'll be opening up at the console probably. So let's say that the console is blank when we open up. We can also clear it if there's loads of errors here. You can just clear it by clicking the clear button. And let's try to show our pop-up and see what happens. So we have an error in the console. It's found something in JavaScript that's not right. It can't find the model for wrong target. Now, imagine we get this error and we don't exactly know where it's come from. Maybe we've got lots of different elements that are working here together. We can go in, if for example here we have a simple solution because we actually have the name of the thing here printed here, which also happens in functions a lot too. You'll see the name of a variable that you've typed wrong or an input that you haven't referenced correctly. So what we can do is go back into the editor and actually search for wrong target, and it'll show me where that is in the element. So the search can also search within functions. It can search within parameters that you've set in objects and things like that. So that then takes me to the object. I see that there's the wrong target, so then I can correct that and make it the correct target, whatever that is. So that's one example. Let's have another example of a bug, just to go through the bugs first before we see how else we can use the debugging console. So let's have a look at this one as well. This is just a simple example I put together of taking an array, checking if it has length, if it's got more than one object, and then outputting to the console. So this command in my function, console.log parentheses, and then either a string or a variable. We could, for example, do a string plus a variable. We could do C and then plus some array. So we could actually print the array directly to the console to have a look at it. But that's not going to work here. There's a problem because in the JavaScript console, the JavaScript editor, it's telling me that it can't read length. That's because, well, we don't know why. Why would that be? I don't know. And we can see it's also thrown an error in the editor itself, and it's also thrown an error in the console. So cannot find we cannot read properties of undefined. So it means that what we should read from that, first of all, is that this is not defined. Therefore, applying length to it, it throws an error because it says I can't check the length of something that doesn't exist. So how do we solve this problem? Well, we could first say, okay, I need to check what's going on here because in my function, I'm pretty sure I have an array there. So what the heck is going on? Let's first console log some array, or we'll say input array equals, and then we'll put the array, some array. And let's say as well, if there's no some, oh, what is it? If type of, what was it? Type of, I forget. Anyway, there's some way of doing it where you can say if it's not an array, then just return. But I can't remember because I'm not a good JavaScripter, so sorry about that. So let's just first of all debug it. So we'll have a look in our console and see if the input array comes up. So this function's not attached to a run signal, so I can just exit the code editor and it'll already run the function. Every time you exit the code editor, it just runs the function if it's not connected to a run signal. So we got input array equals undefined. That's not good, so that explains why there's properties of undefined. It's pretty self-explanatory. Then we have to really think, okay, well, it's here where the problem exists. Inputs.array is not defining, is not assigning itself to this variable. Oh, it's because I haven't actually hooked up something to it. So at least we've found the place where the problem exists. We can run the function again, and then we can see array is long. See, object. So there is an array, it's just not printing the array because it doesn't print out in a string. We could probably stringify it or something to make it visible, but we don't need to do that. So that's good. And then we could also say, okay, if some array is length is greater than 0, then we say array is long, see sum array. And then here I want to do sum array dot length. And we'll say see it's objects, oh no, we'll do a space, objects long. So we're doing array is long, see it's space, number, a number of objects in the array, then plus and space. So inside the string, obviously we have to have a space, objects long, and it's going to print out array is long, see it's 13 objects long. So it's really a way for us to view what's happening step by step in the code if we want to. Whatever steps we need to see, we can see by checking this. So if we imagine another example where we add an array which is empty, I'm going to call this empty array and put this up here. So take this away. So now it's going to throw in theory an error saying input array is empty, and there we go. So the second thing that I put in there as a bug checker was throw error, or throw, I think it's new is the better way to do it, isn't it? Throw new error, ain't no array. Throwing an error, it means that it won't just print something out in the console, it'll give me a full-blown error and it'll explain in the JavaScript where it is, but that doesn't really help you because you're not going to be able to see within the noodleviewer.js file. It's really about the error itself that it's throwing. So that's just another way to put something in the console, but also to throw something in the editor. So it doesn't just, when it's just a console, I don't see anything in the editor. It runs fine and it doesn't throw anything here. But when I do throw new error, then I actually can see it on the affected function. I can see it in the component chooser picker. I can see that there's an error here. Component has warnings, and when I go in, it'll show me which one. I'll also see it up here. So there's an array at this in the start page. So it really guides me to it much better. So if it's not just about debugging, but it's really like, if this happens, I want to know in my editor that it's happened, then that's a good way to do it. Obviously, if it's running in the browser and the user has this error, they would be able to see it in here. So it's another thing to be careful about with console logging and errors. Don't forget that if you want to leave them in for whatever reason, then the user will be able to see them too. So don't be like API key equals, just to like check what the API key is and then kind of print it to the console. Like obviously the user could find the API key if you left it in the front end editor, but like don't make it easy for people maybe to say how things are working behind the scenes in your app. So something to be careful about as well. So that's errors and console logging. I also wanted to show an example of how you could check an API call, whether it's working correctly or why it's not working. So I've thrown an example together here using a free API called ageify.io. So you put in a parameter with your name, a URL query parameter and your name, on a name, and it'll print out the average age of people with that name. It's a really stupid API, but it's just for the example. Now, if we let this run with this query parameter, which is name bug, let's see what happens. So it's done a GET request to unprocessable content. It's thrown an error, and we can see here, missing name parameter. So it's great, we get that in the console log. We could also check the network tab. So if we clear this and start again, run the function by just quitting the function, or by, for example, if it was hooked up to a run signal like this, you could also just hook up a switch to it and say when it's switched on, it runs. And then every time you switch it in here in the editor, it runs. There, I've just run it twice, so you can see here. It's just been run twice. So the network tab shows us all the calls that are going out to things, for example, to fetch images, to fetch it shows getting certain scripts that might need to run your app. But we can clear it and just see immediately what's running at this very second. So we can see that we made a request to ageify.io name bug equals Richard. It was a GET request. It gave a 422 response that'll help you. If the API provider has a list of responses, it'll tell you 422 is this problem. So that helps. Sometimes it's just 500 and you don't know what the problem is. But most good API providers will provide you with a reason for this response. Don't really need anything else here. What we're interested in is the payload that went out. So we have a query string parameter and the response. The response is error missing name parameter. So this just shows us kind of a view of what we're seeing from here when we say we want JSON data with the result.json. That's what we're seeing in the network tab as well. So it gives us a quick and easy way to debug what's happened. So the code that we got wrong, the response. So it's the same sort of as in the console, but it just gives you a little bit more of a clean view of what happened in that direct API call, what the parameters of that were. So let's change that, and it said that we need a name parameter, not name bug. So we change that, and then we get our response. Or do we? Because did I print it? Yes, I did. So, oh yeah, because we hooked up a signal. Haha. So the fact that we hooked up a signal means that it won't run anymore when I exit the editor. I have to go on, off, on, and then it runs, and it's printed out to the console, age 75. Wow. I know that I look a little bit old, but geez. And in the network, you'll see that there's now a successful request. It's given back a 200 response, which normally is the response for success. It sent out the good name query parameter this time, and we got a response which was there are 123,000 Richards in the database, and the average age is 75. Perfect. Let's look at one final thing before we go about console logging. So we don't just have to have things print out from the editor in the console. We can actually use this to access anything that is globally available, or any kind of variables, objects, things like that are happening within the app. And this is a great way to explore what you'll find in the Noodle docs, or the Open Noodle docs, or the Fluxscape docs, or whatever, in the JavaScript reference. So you'll see that there's variables, objects, arrays, all of this stuff that explains how JavaScript works, how the specific way that Noodle works with JavaScript in Noodle. Some things that I don't really understand, like events, so I'm not going to start going through all that stuff. But even records, things like that, how to fetch records from the database. If you're using the Noodle Cloud backend or the Fluxscape backend, you can use these commands to either in a function to fetch records manually, or in the JavaScript console to test fetching things. Users as well, if you're using the Noodle backend or the Fluxscape backend, and you want to check user details or things like that. But anyway, let's look at the basics, which is, for example, variables. So I have a variable in my app that is being set by this button, where I'm setting it to true. So let's have a look and see what that looks like. If we set that variable there, test, and we leave it at false, just at rest, let's say. I'm going to refresh that. We have our console is now cleared out, and what we're going to do is check. We're going to type in a JavaScript command. It's essentially the same as like typing in a line of your code and executing it to see what it does. So let's type in Noodle. This is coming directly from here. Noodle.variables. Whatever the variable name is. Noodle.variables. Test. undefined. So at the moment it's nothing. I could have set it a default value of false on page load, and then set the value to true a little bit later on, just to show what I'm talking about. Like any other console, if I press up, I can just get back to the same command that I was at before. So you can see that Noodle variables.test is false. Now I can click make some bugs, so it's not making bugs this time, and do the same. I'll just do up again, and now we can see it's true. You can also do this for objects. So let's have a look and see, say this object, we don't have it nice and neat here. We actually want to see what's happening with this object. Is it globally available, or what are its properties? And maybe we don't have it in the editor directly. Maybe it's part of a function or something like that. But we do have the ID of the object. All objects in Noodle, normally when they're in an array, coming back, for example, from a query, without even having to go through an array, normally they're assigned some sort of array ID, or object ID, sorry. Each object will be assigned some sort of ID. So say like this one, we didn't know exactly where it was and we want to check it. We can click on that, get the ID, go in here and type Noodle objects dot, and then just the ID. And now we have it. Go in here, check T for target, check the data, and you'll see the different parts of the data object that are, or of different parts of the object, the same as what we see here. So it's another way to view and inspect objects and test out your code while you're doing it. If there's a part of your code that's not working, for example, you're doing Noodle objects object.get, for example, and typing in some ID that doesn't exist, and you see that there is no some ID, it's an empty object. So it's telling you that there is one. It's kind of maybe just saying, yeah, there could be, but it's empty. If there is one, I don't know what it is, it's empty. So it's a way to test out your code before you, for example, write it into a function, or if you're writing it into a function and for some reason it's not working, it's a great way to test it out. And any of these things that are in here, you can play with them and test them in the console before you start putting them in the function and just see how it works. Just use this as your like code playground if you want to learn, especially for a lot of noodlers who don't know how to use JavaScript. It's a great way to learn how to play with the code and play with all of these different extra things that you can use that go way beyond what you can do with the nodes. You know, like the set object properties node is great, but if you look into the object methods themselves, you'll see that there's more that you can do than just creating an object. You can really go very precise and deep with the whole thing. So I hope that that's illuminated a bit the benefits of using the console and playing with the console. I hope that you'll get something out of that and get experimenting with it yourself, and I hope it'll take your noodling to a whole new level. And I will see you very soon in some new Simple Rig tutorials. Thanks for watching.